Alright, so Friday the 13th Part 2, the first sequel to the Friday the 13th franchise. Which, the Friday the 13th franchise to me is an interesting one because Jason is the icon of this franchise. He is basically what everybody thinks is the killer in all the movies, which is definitely not true. But I like that people who are casual about this franchise don't ever think about that Jason was not the killer in the first one, and it was his mother, and she avenges Jason's death and kills these camp counselors because they weren't paying attention and having sex, and he drowned. And I like that the first movie itself is literally a whodunit, and nobody even knows. Whenever that movie first came out, whoever people who saw that in the theater would probably have been wondering who would be this killer. Nobody, there's no explanation to who the killer is or what. And I liked that so much in the first one. I thought the first one is a really great whodunit. I think it's really cool because you don't get a clue of who it is at all until the very end, whenever Mrs. Voorhees shows up and tells her story. Um, and then in the end, she's beheaded by Alice, and Alice is the only survivor. And Jason pulls her underneath the lake, and but then she wakes up and realizes it was a dream, but he's still out there. And that was a cool ending for the first one. I like how the first one does have Jason in it, but then this one starts out with a fully grown Jason, which to me, I mean, logic aside, I think it's cool, but with logic, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like, what has Jason been doing for 20, 30 years since 1958? That is like, I mean, it's supposed to be a horror movie with a silly premise. I understand, but I'm just like, man, that's really weird that nobody ever found Jason. And whenever I watched the Crystal Lake um, Chronicles, which is the based on the book about all the Friday the 13th films, they were talking about how the in the first film Jason is definitively dead. He is gone. Um, and in this one he just shows up because the writing made or because they wanted to have another movie with a killer and they thought Jason would be good, but he died. So it doesn't make any logical sense, but I think it's still fun regardless. Um, I think that this is a really great sequel, and I like how it's the first one with Jason. I like how it is a whodunit still, except like they mention Jason in the movie, like he's out there, like he's the killer. So it's not as much of a whodunit as the first one. It doesn't feel like that, and it's not like a huge negative, but it's more obvious than the first one because in the first one you had no idea who it was. And they had something that they were going to put in it about a missing finger in the first one, like in the writing, but then they said like they took it out. But in the first one, you had no idea who the killer was or why they were doing this at all until the end. You realized what happened. But in this one, it's kind of obvious that it's going to be Jason because Jason popped up at the end of the movie and dragged Alice in the lake, and she dreamt it and acted like he was still in the lake. So you knew that it was probably going to be Jason. There wasn't really much of a whodunit aspect like the first one. But this one to me is very similar to the first one, and I'm going to say that about every other Friday the 13th movie. They're all very, very similar, either just in a different location or whatever. But this this one I think is really, really entertaining, like the first one, and I like how it's it's like the first one, but I think it's still entertaining. I think that these new characters are fun and entertaining, and um, I like Jenny Field a lot. I thought that she was a great final girl, like Alice. I thought that she had a great personality to her, like the Alice character did. Adrian King played in the first one. I thought that was really cool. That like in the second film they still followed this. They started to follow a tradition of these final girls, but they have great personalities. And with horror movies, they're not going to be well written, and they're not going to have conventional things like good writing or character development. They're just going to have characters that are endearing, or if you think they're endearing, I think that these characters are in this one too. I think that this is a great sequel in that aspect because these characters are all still likable. And I like too that this is the first one and maybe one of the only ones where half of the camp counselors go to a bar like halfway through the movie, and then half of them live, and then the rest of them die at the cabin with Jason. But I like the idea of that in almost all the Friday the 13th films, everybody dies except for like a couple of survivors. But in this one, there's like 20 survivors. Like, a lot of these people go to this bar and get so drunk they stay there so they don't get massacred by Jason. And that doesn't happen in the other movies. I think that's a really cool thing that people don't give credit for in this, in just terms of it's a slasher, but like not everybody gets it. Besides a couple survivors, like every of these movies do. But I thought that was really cool. And I thought that um, Jason is shown a lot in this with the burlap sack, and I think it's pretty creepy, even though it's just the town that dreaded sundown, where like that killer in that movie had the burlap sack too. So it's not much different in terms of that, but I liked him in a burlap sack, and this is the only one he's in, a burlap sack. And I thought that it was pretty creepy because all you see is just his one eye, just got a hole open in one eye. And then you see later, whenever he like pops at Jenny in the dream, he's got an eye drooping, and the other one I guess is up normal. So like that's why he's got just the hole in the eye down there, which I thought was a cool touch. And I thought that it just kind of upped the ante a lot in terms of it was a higher kill count, I guess, than the first one, which made it more entertaining and more fun. And I thought that, just like I said, these characters are likable, and it's just it's hard to explain anything else about it because it is very similar to the first one, but it's still entertaining, if that makes sense. It's a very entertaining sequel, but it's not much different besides a few little things. And I'm not. I want to mention the cop out with Adrienne King's character Alice. At the beginning of the movie, after she cut off Mrs. Voorhees' head in the first one, she's alive. She's at a Crystal Lake Apartments, so she's close to where Jason is. And she explains to her mom on the phone, like, this is the way I'm gonna cope with dealing with this situation. Like, she gets close to the place where she murdered a woman, which I thought was really weird. And I felt bad for Adrienne King because the way that, like, she was kind of written out because she didn't do the movie all the way through. I don't know what the reason was. I heard it was money, or maybe it was because she had a real life stalker. I don't know if that's coordinated at the same time, but she opted out to not do this movie. She did like, but I don't know if it was her choice or the studio's choice to make her just in the first 15 minutes and get killed off. But to me, it wasn't as insulting as, say, Halloween Resurrection, where you have so much history with Laurie Strode and then she dies like 15 minutes in a weak way. In this one, Alice, to me, it's kind of annoying that she dies immediately, but it also isn't that bad because she killed off the killer in the first one. She doesn't technically know if Jason is really out there. She had a dream about him. And he was a kid then, so she's probably not even thinking that this is really true. She's just scared for a situation that's going on after she killed Mrs. Voorhees. So it's not as insulting to me because she's not completely stupid. She's just coping with this situation, which I think is weird though that she goes to the camp, like apartments close to the camp. But the killer was dead in the first one, so that makes more sense, I guess, than Halloween Resurrection. But like with this, like the killer was dead in the first one. How does she know if Jason is truly out there? But then he kills her, and a lot of people get really insulted by it. And I feel like it is a cop out, but it's not like that insulting to me. I feel like Halloween Resurrection is a very way worse example of killing off a character in a stupid fashion that just, to me, pissed me off so much. But this one, to me, it's just like she died quickly, but it made sense, I guess, but it was still a little cheap. But it wasn't like I wasn't like really pissed off about it. I was just like, oh, okay, she's gone, I guess. But we get good personality characters too in the rest of the movie though, so because I really like Jenny. I like that we got this character. I thought that was cool because she is really endearing like Alice was. And I thought that all these characters were fun and had different personalities, even though they were the tropes of all these horror movie characters. I I thought that was cool, and I thought that the movie overall is a really fun sequel, and I think it's great. It's a great first one with Jason, and I think it really works for me watching him. Like, this is definitely one of the better ones out of all the films. So overall, I think it's really a great sequel.